superglue chamber. I set my things on the evidence table and walked over to the window. Everything outside looked so quiet and peaceful. It was such an irony that the most spectacular view was from the very room where evidence from the most heinous and violent of crimes passed through for processing. I sat down on the radiator and looked around the dark lab. I wondered how many hours of my life had been spent surrounded by these four walls. I sat there in the dark for a long time, just thinking. It was difficult to believe that a decade had passed since I walked through the crime lab doors for the first time, green with experience but eager to learn. I wouldn't have believed it if someone told me that I would eventually become the most senior civilian investigator in the lab, whose experience would be topped only by one detective. I didn't regret a single moment of my time spent in the crime lab, but what I did regret was allowing the job to become such a core component of my life and letting my personal identity become so inextricably intertwined with the work that I did. I wished that I had listened to the words of the firearms examiner a few years before when he said that I would love this place more than this place would ever love me. He was right. Although I felt like I was an integral part of the unit, I was really nothing more than a number, and the lab would continue, with or without me. That stung. My decision to leave the crime lab had been a long time in coming. I struggled with the idea for well over a year, but it wasn't until my husband, Bob, and I brought our infant son home from Guatemala that I realized that I needed to reevaluate my priorities. I no longer wanted to work midnight shift, have rotating days off, or be faced with an endless stream of overtime. I wanted to spend Christmas under the tree, not looking at the guy who made himself into an ornament and dangled lifelessly from its branches. I didn't want the cranberry sauce on the Thanksgiving dinner table to remind me of blood clots anymore. And I didn't want the 4th of July fireworks to take me back to the time when they misfired and landed in a crowd of spectators. I wanted a job where you'd get in trouble for saying things such as, "He needs his rectum swabbed," or "Can you fish that rubber out of the toilet for me?" I wanted a normal life. My walk on the wild side started years before. My mother didn't care what I did for a living as long as I wore a dress to work. My father just hoped I'd find someone willing to pay me to do something, anything. My brother held a prayer vigil in an attempt to convince God to land me a job in another country. And me? I wanted to work with dead people. So I sat there, strapped in what looked like an electric chair. A huge, rude, inhospitable mass of muscle sat behind a nearby table and studied a piece of graph paper that was spewing from an antiquated-looking polygraph machine. I wanted a job as a civilian crime scene investigator, CSI, more than I had ever wanted anything before. But the steps involved in landing one of these coveted positions seemed to never end. I had applied for this job over a year ago, and although I had passed the panel interview, physical assessment, and background investigation, I still had to get through the damn polygraph and psych exam. My interest in death was my parents' fault. My dad, a city cop turned firefighter, had become quite familiar with the crime-laden streets of Baltimore, and quickly realized my brother and I would become corner hoodlums if we attended the public school in our district. In 1972, we packed up the Monte Carlo and moved to the boonies. We escaped crime all right, along with the other pleasures of urban living such as municipal pools, community playgrounds, and corner stores. My friends and I spent the long summer days engaged in contests to see who could pick the most beetles off the rose bushes. One of our favorite pastimes involved exploring the woods for witches and evidence of the sect of half-human, half-monkey people who lived on Derby Drive a million years before us. We found the bones of the monkey people, along with the remains of small animals that provided proof our ancestors were meat eaters. I slept with the bones of the monkey people.